r/confessions. Sit back, relax and enjoy this video. I almost killed my stepmom. This is pretty hard for me to post. I've never talked to anyone about this, even my wife doesn't know the full extent of it, but here we go. In 2000 my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. She was a 2-pack-a-day smoker for about 25 years. She fought hard and was able to extend the short life expectancy the doctors gave her. I'm not sure how long they gave her. I was 10. They spared me the details. Anyways, she survived for over a year and ended up passing away in February of 2001. I remember as if it was yesterday. Her best friend came over the very next day as we were in mourning to pay respects and say goodbye to her friend, which is normal and fine. The thing I felt weird about was that same night, the day after my mother's passing, she spent the night with me and my dad. She slept on the couch. At the time I didn't think too much of it. Had other things on my mind, obviously. Plus we had numerous family and friends coming by and sleeping over before her passing as well, so I grew semi-used to it. Time goes by and it seems every other night she's sleeping over. Within the first month of my mother's death she's finally sleeping in my dad's room with him. During this time she was respectful and nice. She brought her 2 youngest kids a lot as well, which was nice at the time. Fast forward 3 months, we ended up moving and she and her 2 kids end up coming with us. By this time they are already talking about marriage, which I strongly protested, along with every single family member of mine as well. They decide to ignore me and everyone else and get married. The same year my mother passed away. At first things were the same as they were, but as time went on she began to show favoritism to her own kids. Which I guess is understandable. But to the extent that it grew was kind of disturbing. She'd let her kids get away with murder. They would taunt me, make fun of my dead mom, throw ashtrays at me yelling your mom wants a hug. She was cremated. So pretty much anything with ash was fair game to use to frick with me. A year goes by in the new house and me being a skater kid, I frequented the skater park outlet. On my way back home one day, I ate crap. But hit a crack in the road on a very steep and large hill. I was probably going in excess of 20 miles per hour. The board stopped, my body flew, then rolled a few more feet. I was barely able to move but managed to hobble back, cradling my arm like a baby and screaming at the tops of my lungs the entire way home. As I'm walking up she intercepts me in the garage and accuses me of overreacting and tell me to quote stop being a little puss. I knew there was something wrong with my arm, considering I was physically unable to move it at all. But she wasn't to me and my dad wasn't home from work yet either. 4 hours I waited for him to show up and when he does, it turned out my SM had already talked to him. So he won't listen either. The next day was a school day. I remember this because I was awoken by my SM's little cretin of a son throwing my full backpack onto my chest to wake me up. I woke up screaming. SM comes running to the room and promptly tells me to shut the frick up. You're not hurt. Stop faking cause you're still going to school. Well, I couldn't stop. I was in agony. I was still holding my arm like a baby, so she punched my bicep, in the fashion friends would I guess you could say, and said I'm taking your dumb ass to the hospital just to make you feel stupid when they tell you nothing is wrong. Well upon seeing the doctor, he almost immediately says yup, your shoulder is broken. I can tell by the way you're instinctively supporting your arm. SM was silent. Doctor set up X-rays, turns out my collarbone was completely shattered. Proved her ass wrong. But it only fueled her rage more it seemed. She became spiteful. Took away all my skateboard, bikes, anything that I could ride. My arm was in a sling anyways so wasn't like I could use them anyways. But she had no intent on giving them back to me. In fact she gave them to her own son. Even my own dad said it was for the best because I've shown to be irresponsible with them. And can't use them correctly. Only thing I was able to do was play video games. Barely. Considering my arm was completely bundled up. Another few months go by and my arm is healing up good, and we all go on an easy hike in the desert. We find and pick some wild cactus apples. Excited and eager, I start eating one with the help of my dad. Turns out there were little mites in the fruit, and I contracted scabies. Half of my face swells up in the most morbid of ways. Couldn't talk right, couldn't open one of my eyes. I was freaked up. My older sister, that I just realized I haven't mentioned at all yet in this post, came to visit me with my 2 nephews. Drove 3 hours just to hang out with me and see how I'm doing. As soon as she sees my gruesome swollen face and she screams in terror, grabs her kids and leaves. Needless to say it made me feel like more crap, but I understand. She calls my dad, urging him to take me to the hospital. But SM again, refuses. Saying it's not that bad and that all I need is a nice warm washcloth. Well, 2 weeks go by. Swelling is reduced, but not completely gone. Sister threatens to call the cops if they don't do something. So stepmom again tries saying she's gonna feel dumb when it turns out to be nothing. Well, this time doctors say at this point they can't tell what it is. Scabies was the most likely considering the symptoms. I'm told that I should have been there 2 weeks prior when I couldn't open my eye. SM takes this as a win. More time goes by. More crap happens with SM. CPS is called and I'm interviewed. Nothing happens with that. Holidays were ruined by her kids, yet I was to blame. I ended up basically being the Cinderella of my house at this point. My bed was even moved into the laundry room. 1 year the pipe burst and my room flooded up to 8 inches. Nothing was done about it. Eventually when I was about 14 years old, I worked up the courage to tell my dad what I thought about her. And how she treats me. Well, I guess by this time, he was so tempted by her that he began talking like her. He said to get over. It's not mean. You're just trying to antagonize for the sake of drama. I told him if that's how he feels, then I'm moving out to live with my sister. Sister agrees and I move out. Life was good for a bit. Till I started missing my dad. I felt like I failed him. So after 2 years living with my sister, I decided to move back in with my dad. Almost on arrival, SM starts her crap all over again. Comments like great, more unneeded doctor visits, or no skateboarding. Don't want your sister calling the CPS again. It was actually my aunt that called, I found out years later. On the day before my 17th birthday, I will never forget the words that came out of her mouth. I was getting breakfast and made a comment on how the house was starting to react with cigarette smoke. I'll admit at this point I was a bit snarky. But I said it to myself. SM wasn't in the room, but she heard me alright. She storms in and tells me if you don't like it to go back to your sister's house. Or did she kick your Winnie ass out and that's why you're back? I snapped. I told her to frick off and to kill herself. She walked up to me and looked down at me. She's a good foot taller than I am. I'm pretty damn short, and says you do it. I fricking dare you. I stare at her in disbelief and she starts laughing. Fricking puss. You're weak. Just like your mom. At this point I have a death grip on my fork, with every intention of sticking it in her throat. But I don't. I keep quiet and continue eating my breakfast. That was the first of many comments about my mom. Seems she took a page from her own kids that used to say very similar insults. Only thing is, she was supposedly my mom's best friend. I call her out on this and she tells me to frick off and die. Because of the years of mental abuse, I become depressed. Suicide was on my mind a lot. And she knew it. She egged me on a lot. Telling me to say hi to my mom in hell when I get there. She would get drunk and say the most horrible things, like I hope Satan makes your mom put cigarette butts out on your face for eternity. After a while of this, I made a noose, measured the rope, and tied it to a wooden beam on my ceiling. One night, I hung myself. The wooden beam broke, and obviously I survived. I took this as a sign that maybe, I'm not the one that needs to die. Eventually, I end up finding my dad's gun after a few days of snooping in his room when no one was home. I hid it in my room and kept telling myself on repeat next time she's blind drunk. Well, a friend came over one night and we began talking a bit. I told him I was fed up and that I had a plan. I didn't go into details, but he's a smart person. He was able to figure out what I was planning pretty easily. He began crying to me. He pleaded for me not to go through with anything and to move back into my sister's house. This went on for quite a bit, but eventually he talked me out of it. I showed him the gun and he snatched it so fast and took off out of my house and down the road to the lake. He tossed that motherfucker as hard as he could into the water. Somehow seeing that made me feel better. Anyways, I realize this is pretty anticlimactic, but after that I just ended up moving back in with my sister. No one in the family has any contact with my dad or his wife anymore, and at this point, I think that's his choice. It's been over 10 years since then. I've moved across the country to numerous different states. I've made a career and name for myself. I got married to my dream girl and we have the best little girl together. Things could not be better. Last I heard, SM's two youngest are in rehab centers, and SM had a massive heart attack that almost killed her. Surprised me that she even has a heart. Karma, I'm guessing. Anyways, that's my life. Laid out in all its poorly written glory. I'm sure some people won't buy this, but I honestly didn't put this here for anyone else other than myself. So it's no skin off my back. Take what you want from this whole thing as you will. I'm just glad to get this off my chest one way or another, and grateful that I had an amazing friend that was able to help me out my darkest of places. Oh, you survived. Now sub. Please.